The first sign of betrayal wasn't the lipstick on his collar or a mysterious phone call, it was the silence. The way Alex's words seemed to evaporate before reaching me, leaving only the hollow echo of what we used to be. I noticed it one Tuesday evening as I stood in my studio, brush suspended over canvas, while the setting sun painted shadows across my latest work. 10 years of marriage had taught me to read the microscopic shifts in Alex's behavior like a medical chart, the kind he pored over at St. Mary's Hospital, where he'd recently been promoted to chief of cardiology. The late nights I could understand, the promotion meant more responsibilities, more lives in his hands. But the silence? That was a symptom of something far more malignant. "Lily, I'm heading out early tomorrow," he called from our bedroom. His voice carried the practiced neutrality of a man who'd spent years delivering both life and death sentences to patients' families. "Complex procedure. Might not be home until late." I set down my brush, watching the crimson paint drip onto my palette like drops of blood. "Again? That's the third time this week." The words came out sharper than intended, cutting through the careful distance we'd been maintaining. "The Morgan case is complicated. The patient needs dash." "The patient always needs something," I interrupted, immediately regretting my tone. This wasn't me, the bitter wife, the suspicious partner. Yet here I was, feeling the acid of doubt corroding my stomach. Alex appeared in my studio doorway, his dark hair slightly disheveled, white coat still on. He looked exhausted, but there was something else, a guardedness in his green eyes that hadn't been there before. "You know how important my work is, Lily. People's lives depend on me." I turned back to my canvas, adding another streak of red to the abstract composition I'd been working on for weeks. It had started as a celebration piece. My first solo exhibition was opening next month at the Henderson Gallery. Now each brushstroke felt like I was painting my own unraveling. "And what about us, Alex? What about our life?" He crossed the room, placing his hands on my shoulders. The gesture should have been comforting, but his touch felt like a stranger's. "Everything I do is for us. You know that." The lie hung between us like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Because I knew, had known for days, about the letter. It had fallen from his coat pocket that morning as I was doing laundry, pink paper folded into a delicate triangle. I hadn't opened it yet, but its presence burned in my desk drawer like a live coal. "Of course," I replied, the words tasting like ash. "Will you at least try to make it to dinner with the Hendersons on Friday? Sarah's been asking about you." His hands slipped from my shoulders. "I'll try. But with the Morgan case dash." "Right. The Morgan case." I dipped my brush in black paint, dragging it across the canvas in a jagged line that split my composition in two. "You should get some rest. Early day tomorrow." He hesitated, and for a moment, I thought he might confess, might offer some explanation that would make sense of the growing chasm between us. Instead, he just squeezed my shoulder once more and left, his footsteps fading down the hallway. I waited until I heard the shower running before opening my desk drawer. The pink letter sat there, innocent as a landmine. My hands trembled as I lifted it, turning it over to see the elaborate cursive on the front, "To my dearest doctor." The water continued running upstairs as I stared at the envelope, understanding that whatever words it contained would shatter the carefully constructed reality of our marriage. In that moment, I felt like one of Alex's patients, lying on the operating table, chest cracked open, heart exposed, waiting for the surgeon to either save or destroy me. I slipped the letter back into the drawer unopened. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I would confront the truth. But as I returned to my canvas, adding layer upon layer of darkness to my once vibrant painting, I knew our life together had already begun its irreversible transformation. The only question remaining was whether we would survive the operation. Morning light crept across our bedroom floor like a confession, revealing the empty space beside me where Alex should have been. The shower had long since fallen silent, and downstairs, I heard the front door close with a quiet finality that seemed to echo through my bones. He was gone, fled to the sanctuary of St. Mary's before I could gather the courage to confront him about the letter that had burned in my desk drawer all night. I traced my fingers across his pillow, still holding the ghost of his presence, and wondered how many mornings like this had slipped by while I remained willfully blind. The signs had been there, accumulating like silent toxins in our marriage's bloodstream, the late nights, the distant looks, the way his phone now lived face down on every surface. Rising from bed, I moved through our morning routine like an automaton: coffee, toast, emails about my upcoming exhibition. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, something dangerous was taking root. Each tick of the kitchen clock felt like a countdown to an explosion I could no longer prevent. By noon, my studio had become unbearable. The half-finished paintings seemed to mock me with their bold strokes and vivid colors, such a stark contrast to the grayscale reality I now inhabited. I needed to see him, to watch his face as the truth finally emerged from its chrysalis of lies. St. Mary's welcomed me with its antiseptic embrace, all gleaming floors and fluorescent certainty. At the nurse's station, a young woman with kind eyes and "Rachel" on her name tag looked up from her charts. "Dr. Thompson is in surgery," she said, responding to my unasked question. "But he should be finishing up soon. Would you like me to let him know you're here?" "No," I replied, settling into one of the waiting room chairs. "I'll wait." And I did, watching the parade of human drama unfold around me, families receiving news both miraculous and devastating, lovers reuniting, children crying, elderly couples holding hands like anchors in a storm. I wondered how many of them carried secrets like mine, how many relationships were silently hemorrhaging behind closed doors. 3 hours later, I saw him emerge from the surgical wing, still in his scrubs, talking animatedly with a woman I didn't recognize. She was striking, tall, with auburn hair cascading over designer clothes that seemed out of place in a hospital setting. As I watched, she touched his arm, laughing at something he'd said, and the intimacy of the gesture sent ice through my veins. I approached them like a sniper taking aim, each step measured and deliberate. Alex saw me first, his expression shifting from surprise to something that might have been fear before settling into professional neutrality. "Lily? Is everything okay?" The woman turned, and I caught a whiff of expensive perfume, the same scent that had lingered on his coat last week. "Oh. You must be the artist's wife," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Victoria Morgan. Your husband has been absolutely wonderful with my case." Morgan. The complicated case he'd been using as an alibi. Of course. "Actually," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake building in my chest, "I need to speak with my husband. Privately." I pulled the pink letter from my bag, watching as recognition flickered across both their faces. "About this." Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment before brightening to nuclear intensity. "Well, I should be going anyway. Doctor, I'll see you tomorrow for our consultation." She walked away, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm that seemed to match my racing pulse. Alex gripped my elbow, steering me toward his office. "Lily, whatever you're thinking, don't." I jerked away from his touch. "Just don't." Inside his office, with its wall of medical degrees and family photos that now felt like props in an elaborate stage play, I finally broke the seal on the letter. The paper trembled in my hands as I read, each flowery declaration of love and longing hitting me like a physical blow. "It's not what you think," Alex said, running his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd once found endearing. "Victoria is complicated. The situation is complicated. Then uncomplicated." I thrust the letter at his chest. "Explain to me why another woman is writing love letters to my husband. Explain why you've been lying to me for weeks. Explain why our marriage has become this performance." He caught the letter, crumpling it slightly. "It's a joke, Lily. The staff here, they like to play pranks sometimes. It doesn't mean anything." The laugh that escaped me sounded foreign to my own ears, sharp and dangerous as broken glass. A joke? Do you think I'm blind? Or just stupid? I gestured toward the door. I saw how she touched you. I smelled her perfume on your clothes. I've watched you pull away from me for months, and now you want me to believe this is all some elaborate prank. You're being paranoid, he said, but his eyes couldn't quite meet mine. You're under stress with the exhibition coming up, and dash. Don't you dare. My voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to freeze the air between us. Don't you dare try to gaslight me into doubting what I know is true. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant sounds of hospital life continuing beyond his office door. In that moment, I saw our marriage for what it had become, a patient on life support, its vital signs failing one by one. I love you, he said finally, and the words landed like ash on my skin. Everything I do is for us. For our future. I turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob, but paused for one final question. Does she know about me? About your artist wife who waits at home while you have consultations? His silence was answer enough. As I walked through the hospital corridors, past the nurse's station where Rachel watched me with concerned eyes, past families caught in their own dramas of life and death, I felt something crystallize within me. The woman who had entered this hospital seeking answers was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes the most devastating betrayals come wrapped in declarations of love. I reached my car before the first tear fell, and as I gripped the steering wheel, I made a decision. If Alex wanted to play games, I would show him exactly how complicated things could become. The gallery walls closed in around me like a tomb of my own making, each painting a testament to what I'd lost. My upcoming exhibition, once a triumph, now felt like a collection of elaborate lies. Every brushstroke spoke of a woman who believed in love's permanence, who trusted in the sanctity of shared promises. That woman was dead now, her remains scattered across the sterile corridors of St. Mary's Hospital. I stood before my centerpiece, a massive canvas dominated by intertwining threads of gold and crimson, my interpretation of human connection, painted in those blissfully ignorant days before the pink letter shattered my world. Now, looking at it through eyes stripped of illusion, I saw only a web of deception, beautiful but lethal in its complexity. Mrs. Thompson. The voice startled me from my dark reverie. Rachel, the nurse from the hospital, stood in the gallery doorway, still in her scrubs. The sight of her triggered an involuntary flinch, another reminder of the stage where my marriage's death scene was playing out. Please, I said, my voice hollow in the empty space, call me Lily. Mrs. Thompson feels like a character I used to play in someone else's story. She moved closer, her practical shoes silent on the polished floor. I've been wanting to talk to you since yesterday. About Alex, Dr. Thompson. My laugh scraped against the air like broken glass. Come to defend your colleague? Tell me what a dedicated physician he is. How Victoria Morgan is just another patient. No. Rachel's directness caught me off guard. I came because what's happening isn't right, and you deserve to know the truth. The truth. Such a simple word for such a devastating concept. I gestured to a bench positioned beneath my betrayal-themed masterpiece. Tell me. Rachel sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Victoria Morgan isn't just any patient. She's been coming to the hospital for months, always requesting Alex specifically. At first, we thought it was normal, he's brilliant, after all. But then things changed. Changed how? The words emerged as barely more than a whisper. She started bringing gifts. Small things at first, expensive coffee, concert tickets. Then larger items. When Alex refused them, she became persistent. Started showing up during his off hours, claiming emergency symptoms that always turned out to be nothing. Each word was a revelation, reshaping the landscape of my understanding like an earthquake restructuring familiar terrain. Why didn't he tell me? Rachel's expression darkened. Because 3 months ago, she made it clear that if he didn't play along with her fantasy of their relationship, she'd report him for professional misconduct. She has connections on the hospital board, and with his recent promotion, he'd lose everything, I finished, the pieces clicking into place with terrible clarity. The late nights. The distant behavior. The careful ways he'd tried to push me away without actually leaving. The letter you found? She leaves them everywhere, his office, the nurse's station, even taped to his car. He throws them away, but she keeps writing them. We've all watched it happen, wanting to help but not knowing how. Hospital administration is afraid of her family's influence. I stood abruptly, moving to another painting, this one a storm of dark blues and violent purples I'd created during my first weeks of suspicion. Why are you telling me this now? Because yesterday, when you confronted him, I saw the way he looked at you. Like a drowning man watching his last lifeline drift away. And I saw the way she watched both of you, like she'd won some twisted game. Rachel rose, her reflection appearing in the gallery's window beside my own. Alex isn't innocent in all this, he should have told you the truth from the beginning. But he's trapped in a situation that's spinning out of control. The silence that followed her words was pregnant with possibility. In that moment, I saw two paths stretching before me, one led toward divorce lawyers and bitter endings, the other toward something far more complex and dangerous. Tell me everything you know about Victoria Morgan, I said finally, turning to face Rachel. Every detail, every weakness, every pattern you've observed. You're not thinking of confronting her. Rachel's concern was palpable. She's dangerous, Lily. Unstable. A smile curved my lips, but it held no warmth. No. I'm thinking of something far more sophisticated than confrontation. Something worthy of a woman who believes she can take what's mine through manipulation and threats. Rachel studied me for a long moment, perhaps seeing the transformation taking place behind my eyes, the emergence of someone capable of meeting Victoria Morgan's machinations with calculated precision. I'll help you, she said finally. But we need to be careful. One wrong move and everything could explode. I turned back to my canvas, seeing it with new clarity. Perhaps it wasn't a web of deception after all, but a blueprint for retribution. Tell me, Rachel, does Victoria have any allergies noted in her medical records? Several, Rachel replied slowly. Why? Because every good strategy begins with understanding your opponent's vulnerabilities. I picked up a brush, dipping it in the darkest shade of red on my palette. And I think it's time we started playing by her rules. As I added a new layer to my painting, each stroke precise and purposeful, I felt the last vestiges of my naive former self falling away. In their place rose something stronger, more dangerous, a woman who understood that sometimes salvation required getting your hands dirty. Rachel watched me work, and I saw in her eyes the recognition of what was taking shape, not just on the canvas, but in the space between victim and victor. We were about to write a new story, one where the supposed prey turns out to be the most dangerous player of all. The truth revealed itself like a malignant growth, each layer peeled back exposing something more sinister than I'd imagined. As I sat in Rachel's apartment, surrounded by carefully compiled evidence of Victoria Morgan's previous victims, I felt my world shift on its axis once again. The stack of files before me told a story of calculated destruction, 3 other doctors, 2 ruined careers, 1 suicide attempt. Victoria Morgan wasn't just an obsessed patient, she was a predator who'd turned destruction into an art form. She picks them carefully, Rachel explained, spreading photographs across her coffee table. Successful doctors, stable marriages, spotless reputations. The things they stand to lose become her leverage. Her hands trembled slightly as she pointed to a particular image, a man in a white coat, his eyes haunted. Dr. Matthews was the first, 4 years ago. He resigned after she threatened to expose their affair to the board. There was no affair, of course, but she had fabricated enough evidence to make it look convincing. The photograph blurred before my eyes as rage rose in my throat like bile. And the hospital does nothing? Her father owns half the board seats. Her husband's family donated the entire East Wing. Rachel's laugh was bitter as winter wind. She's untouchable through official channels. I rose from the couch, moving to Rachel's window. The city sprawled below, its lights piercing the gathering darkness like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere out there, Victoria Morgan was playing her twisted game with my husband, believing herself invincible in her fortress of privilege and manipulation. "Tell me about her allergies," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging beneath my skin. "You mentioned there were several." Rachel hesitated, professional ethics warring with personal justice. "Lily, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking I'm thinking about survival." I turned to face her, letting her see the steel that had replaced my tears. "I'm thinking about all the lives she's destroyed, about the ones she'll destroy next if someone doesn't stop her. I'm thinking about my husband, who's probably sitting in his office right now, drowning in guilt and fear because he tried to protect me by carrying this burden alone." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Finally, Rachel reached for her laptop. "She has severe reactions to latex and certain preservatives. The kind that require immediate medical attention." My mind raced with possibilities, each more elaborate than the last. "And her schedule? The time she comes to the hospital?" "Regular appointments every Tuesday and Thursday. But she shows up randomly too, always managing to find Alex when he's alone." Rachel's fingers flew across the keyboard. "She's careful about security cameras, knows exactly where the blind spots are." "Of course she does." I moved back to the couch, picking up another photograph, Victoria at some hospital fundraiser, radiant in designer clothes, her smile as practiced as a surgeon's incision. She's had years to perfect her technique. A plan began taking shape in my mind, dark and intricate as the abstract pieces I'd been painting. What if we turned her own methodology against her? Created a situation where her carefully constructed facade crumbles publicly? Rachel leaned forward, interest warring with apprehension. "What are you suggesting?" "You said she knows the hospital's blind spots. But does she know mine?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through gallery photos of my upcoming exhibition. The Henderson Gallery has excellent security cameras. State-of-the-art, covering every angle. And in 2 days, it hosts its premiere viewing night. Every notable name in the city will be there. Understanding dawned in Rachel's eyes. "Including hospital board members." "Exactly." I smiled, feeling the pieces click into place. Victoria Morgan strikes me as someone who wouldn't miss an opportunity to appear cultured and connected. Especially if she heard a certain doctor would be attending with his wife. She'd come, Rachel confirmed. She can't resist any chance to insert herself into Alex's life. But how does that help us? I stood again, energy coursing through me like electricity before a storm. Because this time, she'll be playing on my canvas. My gallery, my rules, my audience. I paused, letting the full weight of my intentions settle. And I know exactly how to ensure her performance becomes unforgettable. Rachel studied me, perhaps seeing for the first time not the victim she'd sought to help, but someone capable of orchestrating their own brand of justice. "What do you need from me?" Access to her complete medical records. Times, dates, patterns of behavior. Everything. I began pacing, my mind racing ahead to opening night. She thinks she's written the script for this little drama, but she's about to discover she's not the only one who knows how to craft a compelling narrative. The night deepened around us as we plotted, the city lights casting strange shadows across Rachel's living room floor. With each detail we discussed, each contingency we planned for, I felt myself transforming. The pain of betrayal wasn't gone, it had merely been transmuted into something more useful, more dangerous. As I left Rachel's apartment hours later, the weight of Victoria's files in my bag felt like ammunition. She'd chosen her target carefully this time, but she'd made one critical mistake. She'd assumed that an artist, a mere painter of pretty pictures, would be easily dismissed as collateral damage in her grand design. Walking through the quiet streets toward home, I smiled into the darkness. Soon, very soon, Victoria Morgan would learn that some collateral damage fights back. And that sometimes, the most devastating portraits are painted not with oils and acrylics, but with truth and retribution. The night before my exhibition opening, I stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by the artifacts of my former life. Each canvas pulsed with a different shade of betrayal, the early pieces naive and trusting, the later ones dark with knowledge. My newest work, still glistening with wet paint, hung like a prophecy in the center wall. I'd titled it Retribution in Red, a symphony of crimson and shadow that seemed to writhe with barely contained violence. My fingertips traced the frame, feeling the smooth wood beneath my skin as I rehearsed tomorrow's choreography in my mind. The invitation had been sent, the bait laid with surgical precision. Victoria Morgan's RSVP had arrived within hours, her flowing script dripping with false graciousness. The predator, sensing fresh blood in the water, couldn't resist one more chance to mark her territory. "You're sure about this?" Rachel's voice echoed through the empty gallery. She stood in the doorway, a manila envelope clutched to her chest like a shield. Her nursing scrubs looked out of place among the elegant installations, a reminder of the sterile battlefield where this war had begun. "I've never been more sure of anything." My voice resonated with a certainty that surprised even me. "Did you bring what I asked for?" She crossed the polished floor, her footsteps echoing like heartbeats in the vast space. The envelope, when she handed it to me, felt heavy with destiny. Inside lay the final pieces of our strategy, Victoria Morgan's complete medical history, her carefully documented patterns of behavior, and most crucially, the photographic evidence of her previous destructions. The board members confirmed their attendance, Rachel said, watching as I spread the documents across a nearby table. "All of them, including her father. They're calling it the social event of the season." A smile curved my lips, sharp as a scalpel's edge. "Perfect. She'll want to make an entrance, establish her dominance early. That's her pattern, arrive fashionably late, command attention, then start her little performance." The security cameras above us blinked their red eyes steadily, recording every angle of the gallery. I'd had them upgraded last week, ensuring not a single corner remained unwatched. Victoria's blind spots wouldn't help her here. What if she suspects something? Rachel's voice carried the tremor of someone who'd seen too many battles lost to this enemy. "She's careful, calculating. She'll be watching for traps." "Of course she will be." I moved to adjust the lighting on my centerpiece, ensuring the shadows fell exactly where I needed them. But her arrogance is her weakness. She's so convinced of her own invulnerability that she'll never expect an attack from someone she considers beneath her notice. I turned to face Rachel, letting her see the transformation that had taken place within me. Gone was the frightened wife, the naive artist who believed in simple truths. In her place stood someone forged in the crucible of betrayal, tempered by rage and refined by purpose. Tomorrow night, Victoria Morgan will enter this gallery believing she's the architect of destruction. She'll wear her designer armor and wield her practiced smile like a weapon. She'll expect to find me broken, desperate, easy prey for her particular brand of psychological warfare. My laugh echoed off the gallery walls, hollow and dangerous. Instead, she'll find herself stepping into a trap built from her own methodology. Rachel moved closer to Retribution in Red, studying the violent swirls of color. "The latex in the new paint primers," she murmured, understanding dawning in her eyes. "The preservatives in the wine being served. All carefully selected. To match her documented allergies." I finished. "Precisely. Nothing direct, nothing traceable. Just a carefully orchestrated environment designed to trigger a very public, very dramatic medical emergency." One that will require immediate attention from the hospital staff present at the event. And when she's vulnerable, exposed. Rachel's voice trailed off as she grasped the full scope of the plan. That's when the photos will be projected on that wall. I gestured to the large white space I'd deliberately left empty. Her previous victims, her patterns of destruction, all displayed for the board members and social elite she's worked so hard to manipulate. A multimedia installation I like to call Predator's Portfolio. The silence that followed was electric with possibility. Tomorrow night, these pristine walls would witness either my greatest triumph or my complete destruction. There would be no middle ground, no room for half measures or retreat. Alex doesn't know, does he? Rachel asked softly. No. I traced the edge of Victoria's medical file with one finger. He's carried enough burdens trying to protect me. Tomorrow night, I protect him, protect us both, by bringing this monster into the light. As Rachel left, her footsteps fading into silence, I remained in the gallery, surrounded by the physical manifestations of my journey from victim to avenger. Tomorrow, these walls would witness a transformation more profound than any captured in paint and canvas. Let Victoria Morgan come with her practiced smiles and poisonous intentions. Let her believe she's walking into another perfectly orchestrated performance. She'll learn, too late, that some prey bite back. And that sometimes, the most devastating art is created not with brushes and paint, but with justice and calculated revenge. The gallery hummed with the electric tension of approaching storm clouds. Through the crowd of black ties and evening gowns, I watched Victoria Morgan make her calculated entrance, resplendent in a crimson dress that seemed to mock my own journey through blood and betrayal. Her smile, practiced as a surgeon's technique, swept the room like searchlights seeking weakness. When her gaze found mine, I saw the flicker of triumph there, a predator certain of her kill. If only she knew she was walking into her own autopsy. The security cameras blinked their steady red eyes overhead as she wove through the crowd, leaving a wake of whispers and sidelong glances. Every step brought her deeper into the trap I'd laid with an artist's precision and a survivor's cunning. The air itself seemed charged with possibility, laden with the carefully calibrated mix of primers and preservatives that would soon transform her elegant performance into something far more revealing. Lily, darling. Her voice dripped honeyed venom as she approached, champagne flute balanced delicately between manicured fingers. The exhibition is quaint. So raw, so full of obvious pain. One might almost call it therapeutic. I met her gaze with a smile that felt like shattered glass. Art often reveals truths we'd rather keep hidden, doesn't it, Victoria? Speaking of hidden truths, have you met Dr. Matthews' widow? She's here tonight, somewhere in the crowd. Such a tragedy, his suicide. The first crack appeared in her perfect facade, a microscopic fissure that only someone watching for it would notice. Her fingers tightened on the champagne flute, knuckles whitening beneath expensive rings. I'm not familiar with the name, she replied smoothly, but her eyes darted briefly to the exit. Too late, I thought. Far too late. Across the room, I saw Rachel position herself near the main breaker panel, right on schedule. Alex stood by my newest piece, looking lost and beautiful in his tuxedo, unaware that he was about to witness his own liberation. The hospital board members, including Victoria's father, clustered near the wine bar, their self-importance radiating like heat. You should see my centerpiece, I said, gesturing toward the large white wall that had remained conspicuously empty throughout the evening. I've saved it for a special unveiling. Something I like to call, patterns of predation. Her laugh was diamond bright and razor sharp. How dramatic. But shouldn't you be more concerned about your husband's professional situation? Accusations of impropriety can be so damaging, especially for someone recently promoted. Indeed they can be. I raised my own glass in mock salute. Almost as damaging as a documented history of stalking and harassment. Tell me, how many careers have you destroyed with your little games? How many lives have you torn apart for the sheer pleasure of watching them unravel? The fissure in her mask widened. She took a step closer, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You have no idea who you're dealing with, you pathetic little painter. I will destroy everything you dash. Her threat dissolved into a gasp as the first symptoms hit. I watched with clinical detachment as her hand flew to her throat, perfectly painted lips parting in surprise. The champagne flute slipped from her grasp, shattering on the gallery floor like the last pieces of her carefully constructed facade. Security cameras are fascinating things, I said conversationally as she stumbled backward. They capture everything, every angle, every moment, every truth. No blind spots in my gallery, Victoria. No shadows to hide your performance. The lights dimmed right on cue, and the large wall blazed to life. Images flickered across its surface, surveillance photos, medical records, documented patterns of stalking and destruction. Dr. Matthews featured prominently, his descent from respected physician to broken man captured in merciless detail. Other faces followed, each telling their own story of calculated ruination. Victoria's gasping had drawn attention now. The crowd turned, murmurs of concern quickly shifting to shocked recognition as they looked from her deteriorating state to the damning evidence projected above. Her father pushed forward, his face ashen as he watched his daughter's true nature exposed in high definition. Someone call an ambulance. Rachel's voice cut through the chaos, professional and precise. Other medical staff in attendance moved to help, but their eyes kept darting to the wall, understanding blooming across their faces as they connected years of whispered rumors to the truth displayed before them. As Victoria was loaded onto a stretcher, her designer dress now streaked with mascara and desperate tears, I felt Alex's presence beside me. His hand found mine, warm and solid and real. You knew, he whispered. All this time, you were fighting for us while I was trying to protect you by pushing you away. I squeezed his hand, feeling the pieces of our fractured marriage begin to realign. Sometimes the ones we love need saving from their own nobility. The gallery slowly emptied, leaving behind the wreckage of wine glasses, reputations, and one woman's reign of terror. In the sudden quiet, I studied my paintings, the progression from naive trust through betrayal and finally to this moment of reckoning. Each canvas told part of our story, but the real masterpiece had been painted tonight, in actions and consequences rather than oils and acrylics. What happens now? Alex asked, his arms sliding around my waist. I leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart against my shoulder. Now we heal. We rebuild. We learn to trust again, but wisely this time. And we do it together. The security cameras continued their silent vigil as we stood there, two survivors learning to bridge the chasms that fear and silence had carved between us. Outside, sirens wailed into the distance, carrying Victoria Morgan toward a reckoning of her own. But here, in this gallery of truth and transformation, something new was taking shape, a future painted not in shades of betrayal, but in the complex, beautiful colors of redemption. I reached for my brush, feeling the weight of it in my hand like an old friend. There was one more piece to create, not of endings, but of beginnings. And this time, Alex would watch me paint, both of us finally free to see each other clearly in the light of hard-won truth.